I want to note real quick that I made a little bit of a mistake when I was taking springs off. This machine should have been stood up on its back or on its side, not turned over. That way the keys wouldn't have fallen out. Now, as I said, the keys should be stored in column order, if for no other reason than to make sure that the machine looks the same when you get done as it did when you started. So if there's a missing key, it's going to be in the same spot. If there's a key that's faded or one that has a bit of extra wear on it, you're not going to have like a worn 4 show up over here. It's going to be where the operator used it, and it'll just preserve the look of the machine. So I would very strongly encourage you to keep the keys in column order. Now that I have some of the key stems out, I want to point out a couple of things. So you can see here they're arranged in numerical order, and you can see that each of them is a little bit different length. One of the interesting things about this is that this line here marks the location of the key plate. This line here marks the maximum length of travel during a key press. So you can tell the keys here. Now usually when you see this, the keys are all lined up and the stems are lower. I wanted to show this view because it illustrates that one of the objectives in constructing these to create a sloped key face. Now they could have done that just as easily by building the surface of the machine at a slope, and instead of manufacturing the extra length in the key stems. However, there is something else to pay attention to. That is the fact that if you take this over here, you line it up so that the key plate line is the same height, you'll notice that there is a different length of travel for this key and that key. And if you go on down the line and you do a comparison, you'll see that it's different for every one. And that is, if you'll pardon the unintended pun, key to how this mechanism operates. That each key pushes the lever down a different proportion. I went ahead and removed all the key tops because it's going to take me a little while longer to repair the ones that are broken. Every single one, with the exception of 2 that I went to put on, broke, so I'm going to have to put them back together, give them a thorough cleaning, and then dip them in epoxy to make sure that they stay together. Then carefully clean out the underside to make sure that there's not excess pressure when I put them back together. Now, to get the key plate off, take out these 6 screws, and then we need to remove the red button. Now, the red button doesn't actually attach to anything except the key plate itself. What it does, it rests on a bar / wire inside that's part of a rocker arm, which pushes the reset mechanism back into place. Well, the control key mechanism. Let's see here. See if that's visible when I get this off. Yeah, so it just sits on top of this, and as you see here, you press that, and that is part of what resets the control key mechanism after it trips. Now, of course, there are some times when you do that where you're not going to be able to get it reset because the entire thing has jammed up. Was it detected multiple errors or something like that, where you're just going to have to abandon the calculation and clear the whole machine. Now on this here, so you can see it's just an end here that's attached to a piece that is probably welded on. Some of these unscrew, some of them pull off. Before you try to pull off, you should always try to unscrew this one. And I should make a note, do not attempt to remove any of the other keys. I'm not convinced that they weren't set in there warm, because this is a thermoset plastic, and over time they have shrunk, so they are on there very tight. And if you pull them off, you're just going to break the keys, if not shatter them, and you're never going to be able to fix them unless you're very, very careful, which I'm discovering from this one. Now, it looks like this particular key top may be unscrewing. Here we go. And actually, no, this was just a push on, pull off. With that, we are now done with the key plate. You can see underneath we have a little bit more cork, and these are supports for the screws for the patent plate and reliefs for various screws and other things under here. And now we have the oil slots, and this is why the oil bottle that they sold comes with a pin. Now back here, you can see that these are much shorter, and you can see that the pin is passing all the way through, even though just barely. So. And of course you can see here the Comptometer stamp. Next in line is to begin undoing the key stops and accumulator interlocks. The first thing that we need to do is take this wire here, let me move the camera over here so you can see it. It passes through the frame and also through this plate here, and we need to free that up. So let's push it just far enough to get it free from where we're going to be working. Next thing you need to do is to get this off. Now this is the release plate. I'm going to show you a bit here. Underneath this you have two little levers that it pushes down on. The first one is here, the second one is here. So as you toggle this, you hold it in place and toggle it, you will see it pushing down on those little levers. Now what they do, they're part of the clearing mechanism. So if I move this out of the way and I press down on the first lever here, you can see that this lever on the left moves every time I press this. If I press the back one, this other lever moves. So if I put this back in place and pivot it, you'll be able to see that motion. This is part of the clearing mechanism. Now, one of the things the clearing mechanism has to do is to release the lock on the error control mechanism. It also has to reset the triggers, and the clearing handle then pushes the rock frame forward to release the spring tension, and this also activates backstop to prevent overspin of the number wheels and make sure that everything stops at exactly the right spot so that when the rock frame comes back forward, it can mesh with the gears again without causing any damage. So this bit here is actually only held on. It's in a hole over on this side and then attached to a spring. Now you can just pull the spring off, but what the instructions would like you to do, and I think this is probably better, is to take this wire underneath it here and get it over to the right. Now that's kind of difficult because you have this in the way and that need to push down. So this pin has little bumps on it on this side to keep it from being pushed through the frame because it needs to support that bit there as well as keeping that spring on. So instead, I am going to detach the spring from the clearing bar. There we go, and that is now free. We're to the point now where it's time to take out the Keystop springs. Now, if you look, you'll see a very long spring right here, and easier to see if I get the flashlight out. There, right there. It connects up into here and also back behind this here. And it's really kind of hard to see on the camera, but we need to disconnect the springs from this end here. And it's usually, I can use my favorite little screwdriver here to grab the end of the spring, pull it down, and take the hook out. That's not going to work in this case because it needs to twist a little bit as you do it. Now, I'm going to see if I can do this here, but I don't think so. I think I'm going to have to play around with this for a bit before I can actually get it to come out. Get in there. Ah, there we go. So you can see the end of it right here. The dental hook here, I think, is probably the best bet to do this, but even still, it's not going to be straightforward in every case, and you don't want to damage the spring when you pull it out, so you have to be very careful how you do it. I'll reposition the camera a bit. You can see here that this is not quite so easy as it might appear. Almost, but not quite. There we go. That one's free. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of these and then go on to the next step. So I finally got all the Keystop springs out, and let me tell you, that was one major pain. My usual technique in dealing with something like that is to try to hold the spring, get a screwdriver behind the end of the hook, and then push that back onto the attachment point while I hold the spring down with one hand and eventually push that end through the hole. That worked, but it was extremely difficult. Be patient when you're doing this step. That's all I have to say, and do your best not to distort the hooks as you take them out. You will have to fix that before I put them back in. With the Keystop springs now removed, we're going to move on to another pair of smaller springs that are much easier to deal with. So if you look here, I'll rotate the camera around so that you can see it. We have the little locking hook here. It's the accumulator locking hook. And if I lift it up, you can see that it's got a little hook attachment on this. And as I push down, you can see that this here moves along with it. This is the pinion reverse lock. And if you look in here, there is a spring that you can see that moves with them. So that's the one over here. And its attachment point is right here. And the other spring that we're going to be dealing with is this longer one here, which is tied to the subtraction cutoff, subtraction carry cutoff. So those two pairs of springs are going to come out. And again, they're much more accessible, so they're not going to be difficult to remove. So to get these springs off, the easiest thing here to do, simply take them with a pair of pliers and twist them free from their connecting hook. And I have 3 wires here that need to be pulled away. This one, and that one. Now, they need to be removed to the left. So, first thing we're going to do is just draw them 1 column away, because they're going to let things go as we do this. Go ahead and push them this direction if I can. That will be the easy one. This one is very, very close to the frame on the other side, but it will clear if you can get it going. A little gentle persuasion. Ooh. Yeah, that's a bit more persuasion than I usually like to use. Something like this. Got it with a pair of pliers. Just gently pull it till it's clear of the bright frame. Then I can pull the whole thing, mostly, with just my hands. All right. So now you can see that there is a bunch of stuff that has now dropped free over here. We need to collect all of that and deposit it in the appropriate bag. Remember, this is the top of the machine, this is the front of the machine, so this is column 1. And there we are. So here's the little spring that we just attached. So it's not very long at all, but kind of important. And the other springs, the other little springs, stay attached to the frame. We will deal with those when we pull the cutoff levers. So I forgot to point something out here. The subtraction cutoff lever, while it's positioned here, it has to act on the other side of the column. So as we pull the subtraction cutoff wire off, that's the lower one down here, it will disengage the cutoff lever, and we will be able to pull it free, pull it out to the right, give it a little twist, and pull it free from the unit, and that too will need to be bagged up. One more note before we finish up here. Now that I have all the materials out, if you'll remember, at some point we removed a spring that was attached to this wire over here. As we withdraw this wire out, this spring will pull free. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and grab it here rather than letting it fall to the ground. Set it aside and put it in the bag for column 13. Now, I'm going to remove the rest of these pins one at a time, carefully label them, and put them in the box that I've been keeping parts in. So exploring things a little bit more, the next step is to remove the springs and segment levers. Now that's these things here. So that's where the rack is attached. Now, these things pull down, and they're the means of providing the motive force for the accumulators. That they're fairly stiff because they pivot all the way in the back of the machine. Now, on examining these, I notice number 1 moves, column 2 doesn't, 3 does, 4 does, but it looks like it's bent considerably. 5 moves, 6 doesn't, 7 doesn't, 8 doesn't, 9 does, 10 does, 11 is bent, and 12 is slightly bent. So that's part of the problem, and I think the reason that these columns here, interesting, Yeah, I think the reason these columns here don't move is because of damage to the trigger mechanism, which is the next thing that we're going to take apart. So now if I put the machine up on end, you can see the segment levers, or the segment levers here. And again, so if I pull one of them is going to move out, you'll see that, or if I pull down on the rack, you'll see that that moves here. Now there are two springs attached to each one, here and here. They're attached to pins on the side, here and here, which we're going to remove after we remove the springs. Now, these are going to be nice and straightforward. They're big springs and the hooks are right here. So all we have to do is just pull them off and let them drop. And then we can pull the wires out to the left and label them appropriately and box them. So I'm going to finish that up. One note, to withdraw this first wire here, you have a little retainer here that has to be pushed up before you can push the wire, so that you can push the wire past it in order to get it out of the machine. So watch out for stuff like that. It's going to happen here as well, and I believe there's one other, I don't see it immediately, but just watch out for that stuff. So as we were removing the forward of those two wires, the brake springs also released. The next step is to remove this wire below the spacer support here, over to the other side, and as we do that, each of the brake levers is going to be freed. And this pin is being a little difficult. Just a second. Here we go. That will free up the first brake lever and its spring. The next step in this process is to remove the touch-off bar here. You have to slide it off to the left. Now you'll note it doesn't come because there's something in the way. That is this here. So if we lift this up, it lines up a hole drilled through that lever there, which allows us to remove the bar. The next step in the process is to remove this bar here. Now, there's something we have to do before we can do that. This little spring right here has to go away. In the other columns, this spring is attached to mechanisms down here, but here there is no assembly for it to attach to, so it has to attach directly to the frame or directly to the bar. So this one's very easy to remove. What I have to do is get under it here, if I can. And just simply pull it forward off the frame, and there it goes. The next thing we have to do, this wire down here passes through a hole in the support right here. So let me zoom in so I can show you that. So this wire right here, and there's the support that it has to pass through. In order to withdraw the bar, we have to pull this wire out to the right to let this clear. And this will move with just your fingers. And note that the spring is going to drop off. Well, actually no, it won't, it's attached to up here. So we need to let that clear. And then we have one other little issue to deal with, and that is the fact that this bar here is attached by pivots which pass through the frame here and here. So in order to be able to withdraw the bar, we have to spread the frame out to release that pivot. Now this is much easier done on the right side than on the left. So here is the right hand frame support. Here's the frame support between column 1 and column 2. I'm going to use my pliers here. There's a pair of heavy pliers. And I'm going to open them up and spread that just enough to be able to release the pivot. And now it's loose. We're not quite ready to remove it yet. The next thing we need to do is remove these 2 wires here. Now that is done by lifting up this little retaining clip here and so we can free up the wires, and then withdraw them out to the left. And I'm going to pull those out and label them and get back to you. So just like on this bar, this one also has pivots attached to either side. So again, I'm going to get to the 2 frame plates, spread it apart just enough to free up the pivot. And then this assembly can come out completely. Alright, back to the other bar. I've zoomed in here so I can show you a couple of things. The next order of business is to remove the springs from these bits here all the way across. That is going to allow us to remove this wire, which will allow us to remove these levers here. I forget what they're called. So don't trust me for terminology, but so far I've been able to get everything to come apart without damaging everything, and that's what really counts. And I will be able to put it back together, I promise you that. So this is the trigger retainer, I believe it's called, and that's the next thing that's going to have to come out. So I am going to, now some of these springs are more easily reachable than others. The bar that we just removed here, or that we loosened, you can get it up and get it out of the way, and this ought to just take a little lifting with the screwdriver here or a hook, and they all should come off pretty easily. So I'm going to finish that, then I'm going to pull the wire that's attached to it and get rid of all the have to take a little bit to work that out in the other direction. There we go. And I'll point out something that it may seem like these wires can come out either direction, so why are we just going to the left all the time? Well, a very specific reason. Because by doing that, you release everything in column 1 first, so that you can bag everything up in the appropriate order. And some of these wires can only come out from the left. There's 1 or 2 that you have to pull out from the right, but most of them come out from the left. So it's a good idea to always follow that so you can make sure that you get things in order. So I apparently actually missed a step. This rod here has a smaller rod underneath it. You'll note that one end of it is pointed, and you can see that here. That there's got this little point on it. The other end of it is squared off. Pull that rod out, and it'll take a little bit of effort, but it should come. And then you can withdraw this bigger rod and get it out of the way, which will be important for the next step, which is unhooking these springs here from the little hook here. And then that will allow us to remove this rod, and that will allow us to free up this piece and get it out. Now, I want to note on this particular piece here that the arm comes this direction, goes into the big hog there. goes down and then crosses to the other column, goes back and forms this little hook right here. So getting this out is going to require a little bit of manipulation, but with this out of the way, it won't be that bad. So I'm going to take this bar out. I'm going to get these springs off, then I'm going to pull this wire out to this side, and I'll make one note about this. Remember this little lever that we had to move up or move down in order to get the other wire out? Well, now we have to move back up in order to make room, back down, in order to make a path for this other wire here to go through. That is this right here. Otherwise, that lever is in the way back here and we won't be able to pull the wire out. One more quick little note. Removing the square rod requires shifting a retainer out of the way in order to free it so it can move. Now that I have more of the mechanism off, I can start to see the damage. So if you look, we can see that this arm here is badly bent right at this location. So it doesn't sit parallel like it's supposed to, and you can even see that there's a pretty sharp bend right here. There are others that are similar. Let's see if I can find them here. Well, yeah. So if we look at column 11, we have much the same thing. So we have a fairly sharp angle right here that is going to keep things from moving the way they're supposed to. And I've got much the same thing in column 12 as well. So all of these parts are going to have to be straightened out when I get finished disassembling the unit. But I think when those are put back in place, that everything should function correctly. I have not seen anything broken. I have not seen any missing or broken springs. All I have seen is just bent metal. So if we go up a little higher, maybe give you a little better view of kind of what I'm looking at here. And I mean, you can see that things are just not proper. Most of them look okay, but a lot of them don't. And the columns that wouldn't move, most of them I think were probably being held by these bent levers interfering with the trigger mechanism and the air control system. So I think this unit's going to be perfectly repairable and it should function fine when I get done, but it's going to take a little while. And you also have to remember that taking things apart is the easy bit. Putting them back together is a lot harder. Keep that in mind if you go to do any of these jobs, but this one was absolutely necessary, and I think the results are going to prove the time worthwhile.